Hi, I'm Jenna,
And I'm Erin.
and welcome to Between Two Filing Cabinets, where we bring you tips, trends, troubles, and stories from HR.
That's right.
So, Erin, we have been seeing a little uptick in a certain area related to HR, and that is in terms of hostile work environment and bullying claims.
That's right. And it's really kind of become clear that there's a lot of confusion as to what hostile working environment is and isn't. And I think a lot of times people use those words informally without kind of thinking about that formal definition. So maybe that would be a good place to start with. So Jenna, what exactly is a hostile working environment?
Yeah, so hostile work environment, you're right, it has a very tight legal definition. And so we're looking at conduct that has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with a person's ability to perform their job, creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. The part that's not necessarily included in there is that it also requires someone being treated that way based on their protected class because of their race, their age, their religion, their sexual orientation, their gender identity. So conduct that doesn't involve a protected class. So let's say something like, I like to yell. And it's not like the, woohoo, you're doing a great job type of yelling. It's like, what are you guys doing? You're so slow that... Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah, that type of yelling that's intended to maybe intimidate people. Well, if I'm an equal opportunity yeller, I yell at everyone. It's not like I yell at just the men or just the women or just the older workers or something like that. If I yell at everyone, that might feel like a hostile working environment in the general sense. Legally, it's not a hostile working environment because there's no protected class issue there. And so that's where I think people get caught up, because when someone's experiencing that at work, they're coming to their supervisor, HR, with it feels what it feels like.
It's the intensity of the experience I think people are talking about. Like, we often do that scenario in the trainings that we do for harassment, like, for instance, using the example that for some reason you're a Huskies fan. Go Huskies. But that if I were to just mock you day in, day out, literally like just really try to get you under your skin, do mean things, if I make it sound to a severe enough degree how much I'm harassing you, it's going to, most people in our classes think, now it's hostile working, it's a hostile work environment because of the degree of the behavior. And it's really not about that. It has to involve, like you said, that protected class.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, if it's not involving that protected class, there's sort of that, it's not necessarily an unlawful act, but we still have a problem to solve.
Exactly.
Because someone is having a really negative working experience. But you're exactly right. What we get from the trainings is, especially if we kind of go, well, okay, let's make fun of Jenna because she's a Huskies fan. Trust me, it's happened.
Not me.
Is that illegal? And people are like, oh no, that's all in good fun. But then when we kind of up the ante and say, okay, well, let's say they're relentless, like you were saying, and I've told them to stop. I say, hey, you know what? Quit decorating my office. Quit sending me all those texts and pictures. And then they keep doing it. That's typically where people then, that's a hostile working environment. Then we go, no, it's actually not, because it doesn't have that protected class. And then people usually say, but that's bullying. Right? And again, kind of a legal issue there, because Oregon doesn't have anti-bullying legislation for employment purposes. And so there was actually a bill that came this session, and it didn't pass, which I think at some point it will, but it's kind of trying to legislate be nice.
Right.
And we're dealing with humans who are not always nice.
No.
And so with that bullying, again, we get into that, it's more like, that's not fair. I shouldn't have to deal with that in the workplace. And I think people are exactly right.
Yeah.
It just might not be unlawful, but a company still has an obligation to address the issue.
Absolutely. And it can be even trickier because sometimes, and we've seen this, an allegation of bullying or that type of creating a hostile work environment can be used against someone for the wrong reason too. So recently encountered this where a coworker was very concerned about the competence of one of her coworkers or one of her colleagues, and had brought that to their attention several times because it had real consequences could be seen from that incompetence.
Brought it to the coworkers' attention?
Brought it to the coworkers' attention first,
Okay.
then brought it to supervisors' attention.
Okay.
And then about a month or two later, was under investigation for bullying by that employee.
Okay.
So
one employee talked with the other coworker who she thought was, or he thought was
not doing her job
not
properly.
doing her job properly. Didn't see the improvement.
Didn't see the improvement, was concerned about how that would affect the organization, brought it to supervisor's attention.
Got it.
And that, was taken into account. And then several months later, out of nowhere, it seemed, the complainant, the person who was complaining about the colleague's incompetence, was targeted with a bullying complaint.
Ah, okay.
So almost, and
Right.
so it's possible to see that, I think, in some situations as like almost that retaliatory kind of bullying complaint.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes it's interesting because you have those situations, and sometimes people know like their days are numbered, and they know that maybe they aren't meeting expectations. Maybe they've been getting feedback from other people, and so sort of as a kind of retaliatory or self-preservation, because sometimes people will think like, hey, if I make a harassment complaint or a retaliation complaint or those types of things, then I'll be protected, and I don't have to do the things that maybe are being asked of me. So if I make a harassment complaint or if I make a retaliation complaint, then maybe it's kind of a get out of jail free card,
or at least buy some time.
Yeah, and so that definitely happens, and it doesn't feel good, and that can have the chilling effect if someone's like, hey, I've gone through all of the steps that I think, I've talked to that person,
right?
And especially if it involves something like a safety issue, or if you're getting customer complaints or client complaints, and you're worried about that, you talk with the person directly, you go to the supervisor, and then because of that, you get hit with a complaint.
Right, no, and I think that there definitely was a concern that there would be a chilling effect for that individual, that, what do I do if I see another incident? I'm very unlikely and be very reluctant to come forward because I don't want to be, I don't want anybody to accuse me of bullying. And I think that there are some things that we can kind of unpack from that experience that would be some good tips for members and our viewers as far as what to do in that kind of a situation. And it seemed like one of the things that was not communicated to the person who was under investigation for bullying in that instance was, this is something we have to do. We have a certain protocol. Anytime somebody alleges something like bullying or hostile working environment, any kind of complaint like that, we have to go through an investigation kind of procedure, and that requires there to be a certain formality in the procedure.
Yeah, and HR's job is to remain neutral in that process, and so if that person is feeling like, gosh, I haven't done anything wrong, and I followed all of the steps, and why am I being targeted? And HR's job is to remain neutral, and so they have someone who's come to them with complaints, and hopefully through that process, they're able to find all of the facts and make a good determination. But you're absolutely right, is that you have to explain that process, and that it's not an indictment, and explain what's going to happen, and that it is anytime, just like they would if they were coming to them about one of their coworkers.
Right, exactly. And I think that was one of the things that felt so jolting about the experience was it felt like an interrogation to that person, because they didn't understand, like, oh yeah, these are the types of questions that we would ask in this type of investigation, that we would be expected in order to be performing our due diligence in those situations. If that was clear, I don't think it would have had that kind of personal aspect to it.
Right.
And then following up afterwards with, okay, next time, so that you do feel like you can come to us or address an issue, a safety issue, competence issue in the future, so that there isn't that chilling effect.
Right, yeah, definitely being clear that, hey, we've conducted the investigation, and here's what we found, and, assuming they found no misconduct, I think, in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. There was
right, so the process worked, but then, making sure that person feels comfortable, so that, like, hey, if you do have concerns, we want you. It's important that you do come forward with these, and hopefully that person will see through, unfortunately, the experience that they just went through, that hey, the process worked.
Right.
You're able to find that there wasn't any sort of misconduct. They're probably still going to have some problems after that, though, because that can be difficult, is complaining employee, we didn't find anything that was misconduct.
Mm-hmm.
But you're still probably going to have two employees who are not too happy with each other.
Right, that's right. Not easy, not an easy situation. And I think it's an outlier for the most part. I think another situation that we see even more commonly, I'd be curious to hear what you think, is that somebody who maybe is taking almost any criticism as bullying, or being a little bit sensitive to that. And so it can, again, we don't want that chilling effect, so that person isn't getting any feedback about the quality of their work,
right?
But they shut down or feel very threatened by any type of feedback and feel like that's creating a hostile work environment or a bullying environment.
Right. Yeah, and in those situations, I usually, kind of say there's probably something else going on with that person that's causing them to react that way. And so then you kind of have to dig in to figure out what that thing might be, and give them some perhaps coaching tools to kind of explore of how do they feel like maybe they can better handle, what do they need to be successful. I mean, sometimes you do get like a serial complainer. It's like every little thing, they just don't get it. They're not going to accept their responsibility. They don't see their role, and that's also part of the investigation. Is like, here's everybody else who has this very consistent story, and then there's you. And yours is the only one that isn't lining up. And so part of that investigation process is to figure out why. Maybe there's a legitimate reason. Maybe they all colluded. It rarely happens, but it could. But sometimes you just you get those really difficult situations where the person just doesn't see their role, doesn't want to own responsibility, feel like they're the only one. And I sometimes coaching works. I don't know if you've seen that. Sometimes it doesn't.
Well, I think sometimes in those situations, if you have somebody who just seems to resist, complain about the feedback they're being given, I think one question or follow-up question for them is to ask them, well, feedback is a part of the job. It's something that I had to do as your supervisor, your colleague. How would you suggest I give it to you instead?
Right.
What would you do differently, right? Now, because I think it is easy, especially if you have a serial complainer, for them to tell you exactly what they don't like about the feedback and the way that you've been giving it. And so to flip that sometimes and say, okay, great, well, how you told me about what you would not like, can you tell me a little bit about how you would like that perceived? So maybe be able to help.
Sure.
Muddy waters, though.
It is, and I think we've seen an uptick in complaints and concerns about bullying is a big one. It's a very commonly used phrase, as along with hostile working environment. So I think if you're in HR, it is important that you understand the legal distinction. Yes. But I think practically speaking, it doesn't really matter. You have an employee who's not having a good working experience, and your obligations to investigate and resolve and to the best of your ability to create a better working environment and address the issues is the same, even if there's not a legal issue attached, if it's just a working environment. And sometimes employees don't like that. Well, bullying isn't illegal. It's not necessarily the argument I would want to lead with of like, well, it's not illegal, so you're out of luck. Definitely not. But helping employees understand, what is a hostile working environment, and what's the difference between bullying and then showing a commitment to, regardless of the situation, you're committed to dealing with it and making sure that you have very clear anti-retaliation provisions as well. So great way to do that. Now is a great time to republish your communications, harassment policies, schedule some training on harassment, workplace respect. Are all really good things to do right now. Yeah,
and especially on that, I like that. One of the things I like best about the training is that it focuses on what is respectful. So it's not just, if it's not illegal, then it's okay. It's focusing on those policies that we have, so that even though it might not give rise to a legal hostile working environment, and something that does need to be addressed because it's having a negative effect on people. And so to kind of focus on, some of those non-legal issues, still you want to make sure people aren't being a jerk at work.
Right. And it can be very easy for a non-legal issue to become a legal issue. For example, let's say someone, does make a complaint and they feel like it's a hostile working environment, and we find that it's not a hostile working environment, but then all of a sudden they are treated differently, denied an opportunity, those sorts of things. Now we have a retaliation.
Yeah, we have retaliation.
Right. So it's very easy it's a slippery slope to get for something that seems like there's not a legal issue for then it to result in have a legal impact. So, just shows the importance why you take everything seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And call us.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Call us. We can take you through that process. We hope you don't have to for that purpose, but certainly that's what we're always here for.
That's right.
So let's file this one under hostile working environment.
Hostile working environment and bullying.
And bullying.
And bullying.
Okay, sounds good. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.